was a time when I truly believed Emily and I had one of those rare, real partnerships people spend their whole lives chasing. We weren't flashy. We didn't post couple selfies every weekend or write long captions about soulmates and stars aligning. But we understood each other, or so I thought. We met in college, stuck through our broke 20s together, and got married when we were both 28. She was ambitious, always talking about making something bigger of herself. I didn't mind that. If anything, I admired her drive. We talked about kids eventually, traveling someday, and maybe even starting a small business together. At least I thought that was the dream, and turns out it was just mine. I had a good job working under Damian, my boss, at a mid-sized finance firm. Damian was one of those magnetic types, smart, well-dressed, smooth-talking, always a little too familiar with boundaries. But people let it slide because he got results. He took a liking to me early on, said I had potential, and I worked my tail off to prove him right. Emily met him once at a work event. I remember her being quiet at first and then suddenly more talkative as the night went on. She laughed at his jokes a little too easily, but I didn't think anything of it. Damien was charming and she was just being polite, or so I told myself. Over the next few months, things started changing. Emily became more distant, not angry, just checked out. She started spending more time at spin class, always had her phone face down, and conversations felt like walking through fog. When I asked if something was wrong, she said she was just tired. Work stress, hormones. Maybe she needed some time to think. Then, out of nowhere, she sat me down one Sunday morning with a coffee in hand and said she wanted a divorce. No yelling, no crying. She said it like she was giving me the weather forecast. I asked her why over and over, but she just kept saying she didn't feel like herself anymore, that the spark was gone, that she didn't want to waste more years pretending. I was stunned. We'd had arguments like every couple, sure, but nothing big, nothing divorce worthy. She wouldn't elaborate, just told me she'd already spoken to a lawyer and that she wanted things to go smoothly. She didn't want to fight. At the time, I couldn't process it. I thought she was going through something. I even offered to go to counseling. She shot that down, said it was already too late. 6 months later, we were legally divorced. No kids, no property battles. She took what she brought in and I kept what was mine. It was cold, clean, and utterly devastating. I moved into a smaller apartment across town. It was quiet, too quiet. I worked during the day and stared at the ceiling most nights, trying to understand what had gone wrong. My friends tried to drag me out. My mom begged me to come and stay with her for a while. I declined. I couldn't face anyone. I couldn't even face myself. Then one Friday evening, a friend from work sent me a picture. It was Emily, dressed to the nines, smiling at Damian at some fancy rooftop event. His hand was on her lower back. They looked cozy, comfortable, like a couple. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that it was just a business thing, maybe a coincidence, but it wasn't. 2 days later, another co-worker confirmed what I didn't want to hear. Emily and Damian were officially dating. People at the office had seen them together often. They'd even gone on a weekend trip to Napa. Apparently, they weren't hiding it. They weren't even trying. The pit in my stomach dropped further when I realized this likely wasn't new. It hadn't just started. I began replaying all the moments I'd brushed off, the way she suddenly got into fitness classes, how she started dressing nicer, even when she was just running errands, how she always said she had meetings and came home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. It all added up. She's been seeing him while we were still married, while I was working 60 hours a week under him. I felt humiliated, angry, but more than anything, I felt stupid. Like I'd been the only one in the room who didn't get the joke. And then came the final hit. I was called into HR one afternoon out of nowhere. Damian said there were concerns about my performance and issues with team morale. I was blindsided. I'd never had a bad review. I asked for specifics but got vague corporate lingo about culture fit and leadership concerns. 2 weeks later, I was officially out. No severance, no references. Just gone. It was like he'd taken everything, my marriage, my job, my peace of mind. I packed up my things and drove straight to my childhood home 3 towns over. My mom was waiting on the porch like she knew I'd come. For the next few months, I stayed there, licked my wounds. I picked up freelance work, bookkeeping, financial consulting, anything to keep myself busy. I started running every morning, ate better, slept more. Slowly, the fog lifted. But the scar was there, not just from losing her, but from realizing that the woman I married had never once looked back. Not when she filed, not when she dated my boss, not even when I lost everything. And just when I thought I'd finally gotten over the worst of it, that's when my phone buzzed with her name on the screen, almost 1.5 years after the divorce, like nothing ever happened. It was short, just one line. "Can we talk? It's important." I stared at it for a solid 5 minutes, my brain running in circles. After everything, after the affair, the divorce, the job loss, she wanted to talk? I didn't respond immediately. I didn't owe her that, but curiosity is a tricky thing. It eats at you when you're alone, so the next morning I replied with a simple, "About what?" She replied instantly and said she wanted to meet for coffee. Nothing dramatic. I almost laughed at the irony. The woman who detonated my life like it was a casual Sunday project wanted to meet somewhere calm and pleasant. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I wanted to know why. Why had she done all of that? We met at a small cafe near downtown, the kind of place we used to visit before everything fell apart. She was already seated when I walked in, dressed in an expensive cream blouse and wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my rent. I sat down across from her. She smiled, like she was greeting an old friend, like none of this was insane. She started with small talk, asked how I'd been, commented on how I looked like I'd lost weight, like this was some reunion between high school friends. I stopped her cold. I asked her to get to the point, and that's when she dropped it. She leaned forward, rested her hand on mine like she used to, and said that everything had worked out exactly as planned, that marrying Damian had been part of a long-term goal. I pulled back before she could finish. I didn't want her touching me. She just smiled. I stared at her, trying to piece the words together in my head. She said that Damian had always been a stepping stone, that he had money, power, and most importantly, ego. He was the kind of man who couldn't resist a woman who made him feel superior, like she needed him. She claimed that she fed him just enough vulnerability to keep him hooked, just enough admiration to make him believe he was her savior. She made it sound like some kind of business deal. She told me that she'd married him just over 1 year ago, stayed long enough to lock down access to his accounts, his estate plans, and his investment portfolio. According to her, he trusted her with everything, believing their relationship was built on love, not strategy. But the kicker? She said the entire time she was with him, she was thinking about our future. Ours, as in hers and mine. That it was all for us. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I didn't even breathe right for a second. She went on to explain that Damian had started treating her the same way he treated everyone beneath him. Controlling, dismissive, arrogant. She said the moment she got what she needed, she filed for divorce just like she had with me, but this time with clauses in place to get a significant settlement. According to her, she walked away with hundreds of thousands in cash, shares in 2 companies, and a condo in Miami. Then, as if that wasn't enough, she reached into her handbag and slid 2 plane tickets across the table. Round trip, Paris, first class. She said we could start over, somewhere new, fresh slate, no past, no pain, just the 2 of us and a big fat safety net. I remember just sitting there, blinking at her, like she was speaking in Morse code or a foreign language. She said she'd done all of this for us, that she had regretted the way she left me, but it was necessary. She needed Damian to believe she was done with me, that the only way he would fall for it was if she were fully committed, even legally. She called it a necessary evil, a sacrifice. I finally spoke. I asked her if she thought I was stupid, if she genuinely believed I'd want to be with someone who lied, cheated, and destroyed me for some twisted version of a long con. She blinked, confused, and then she got defensive, said I should be grateful. Now I could live a better life because of what she did. She called it a win-win. I laughed. A real unfiltered laugh that made heads turn in the cafe. She didn't know what to do with that. I told her that she didn't do this for us. She did it for herself. That if she really wanted a future with me, she wouldn't have walked out without a shred of remorse. She wouldn't have let me lose my job. She wouldn't have slept with my boss under our roof while I was out working long hours trying to build a life for us. She started tearing up then, like it suddenly hit her that this reunion scene she'd played in her head wasn't going to script. She said she thought I'd understand, that I'd still love her. I told her I did love her, once. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. But that woman had been buried under ambition and lies long before she filed for divorce. And whoever she was now, I didn't know her. I didn't want to. I got up, walked away, left the tickets sitting on the table. She called my name once, but I didn't turn around. That evening, I got another message from her. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please think about it. I didn't respond, because in that moment, I realized something crucial. She hadn't just betrayed me. She never saw me as a person to begin with. I was a placeholder, a rehearsal, and once the real stage was set, she used me like a prop and moved on. Now she wanted to come back and rewrite the script like none of it had happened. But the thing is, I'm not her second act. Update 1. After walking away from Emily that day, I figured I'd finally seen the end of her, that she'd crawl back into whatever luxurious condo she conned out of Damian and moved on to her next strategy. I didn't expect silence, but I also didn't expect the kind of escalation that followed. The texts didn't stop. First they were gentle, pleading. She said she still loved me, that she did all of it so that we could have the life we always dreamed of. Then they shifted to guilt tripping. She told me I was cold, heartless, and ungrateful, that I didn't deserve her sacrifice, that any other man would have jumped at the opportunity she was offering. Then came the calls. I didn't answer a single one. I'd blocked her. But she started using different numbers. I even got a few from mutual friends who'd clearly heard her side of the story, about how she was this misunderstood genius mastermind who only did what she did for love. A couple of them told me I should just get over the betrayal already and enjoy the money, that I was being dramatic. Dramatic? That word stuck with me for days. I felt like they were crazy. Did they not have any morals? I told them to shove it. Meanwhile, I was doing better than anyone expected. I had picked up consulting gigs after losing my job, and slowly clients started referring me to others. The work was steady and, more importantly, mine. My own rules, my own time. No more bosses with slick suits and backhanded handshakes. One afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It wasn't Emily this time, it was Damian. He didn't even try to fake politeness. His voice was cold, sharp, and furious. He said I had ruined his marriage, that Emily had run off with money he hadn't even realized she had access to. He said she drained accounts he didn't know she was listed on and disappeared. He asked me if I had anything to do with it. I almost choked on my own laugh. I told him I hadn't spoken to Emily in weeks, and that he might want to ask himself how someone could rob him blind while sharing a bed with him. I reminded him of the time he pulled me into his office and told me he was a man of vision, while he patted my shoulder like I was his sidekick and slept with my wife behind my back. He hung up. But it didn't end there. I found out later that Emily had indeed made off with quite a bit of Damian's assets. She had transferred things gradually, under the radar. Apparently, during their marriage, she convinced him to streamline his finances by giving her access to a few things while she handled the domestic side of things. By the time the divorce hit him, she had used a combination of spousal protections and prenup loopholes to walk away with a high six-figure settlement and real estate. And the best part? She filed for divorce almost exactly 1 year and 1 day after they married, just enough time to avoid suspicion, but not enough to raise flags about a long-term partnership. It was precise, clinical. She knew exactly what she was doing. And then came the final straw. She showed up at my apartment. It was late, raining. I opened the door and saw her standing there, soaked but smiling like it was the most romantic scene in the world. She said she was finally free, that she'd closed the chapter on Damian and wanted to start over. She said Paris could wait, but she couldn't. I told her she was insane. She stepped in anyway. I didn't know what part of her believed that I would just crumble and welcome her back like some prodigal partner. She walked through my living room like it belonged to her, reminiscing, touching picture frames, commenting on how I decorated my new home. It was surreal. Then she dropped what she thought was the ultimate card. She said she had transferred a portion of her settlement into a joint account with my name on it. I asked her why she would do that. She said it was proof of her commitment. This time she wanted to build something for real. I told her to leave. She didn't, so I called the police. As soon as I said the words, her whole posture changed. She laughed at first, thinking I was bluffing. Then she saw I wasn't, and her expression cracked. Before she left, she said something I'll never forget. She told me that men like me always end up crawling back, that I'd wake up one day and realize I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't respond, just stood there until she walked out into the rain again, this time for good. A week later, I got a call from the bank. The account she claimed was ours, closed. No trace of any deposit under my name. She'd lied. Again. It was our old joint account that I hadn't bothered closing. I wasn't surprised, but I was free. Free from the delusion, the false hope, the chaos she dragged around like it was perfume. She'd spent her life treating people like stepping stones, playing long games with no regard for the lives she crushed in between. And now she was out there again, searching for the next rich fool, the next business deal masked as romance. And as for me, I was stronger, clearer. Sometimes it takes a hurricane to teach you what kind of house you've built. Mine wasn't perfect, but now it had a new foundation. And Emily? She was the storm I survived. Update 2. I had almost forgotten how chaotic things used to be when Emily was in my life until I got another unexpected call. This time it wasn't Emily and it wasn't Damian. It was Damian's ex-wife, Lisa. We'd only met once, briefly, at a company holiday dinner years ago. She had been polite and distant. She seemed sharp-eyed. I remember her because she never looked at Emily like the rest of the room did. No curiosity, no admiration, just warning. Like she already knew the game Emily was playing before the first card hit the table. She introduced herself quickly and got straight to the point. She told me she had been watching the fallout from afar. Emily's little European escapade, the stolen assets, the mess Damian was now drowning in, and that she wasn't the least bit surprised. What did surprise her was how fast it all crumbled. Lisa said she'd heard through shared business connections that Damian's reputation was taking a nosedive. Investors were backing out. He was trying to sell properties under the radar. The affair that he thought was his ticket to happiness, it had become a stain that just wouldn't go away. Turns out dating your employee's wife and then marrying her within weeks of firing said employee doesn't exactly win you trust in the business world. She chuckled and said something that stayed with me. Poetic justice never runs on your schedule, but when it arrives, it's rarely late. We talked for over an hour. It was two people who had once been close to a pair of narcissists, finally exhaling. I was surprised by how much I genuinely liked talking to her. Lisa shared how she had tried to warn Damian that Emily wasn't interested in love, just leverage. But Damian thought he was untouchable, that Emily had chosen him, and that meant something. At that time, she was his ex, but she still warned him. That says more about her than him. She told me Emily had tried the same tricks years ago with another executive, but hadn't been successful. I was surprised. The guy had smelled the manipulation early and cut her off. Damian wasn't that smart, or maybe he was just arrogant. And now, Lisa said he was trying to sue Emily for fraud. But she had played the legal angles too well. Everything had been technically within bounds. Dirty, but legal. A week after that call, I got a message from Emily. Was she going to spend all her money on new numbers? This time it wasn't begging, it was different. She sounded angry. She accused me of turning people against her, like she was spiraling and needed someone to blame. She claimed I was feeding information to Lisa, that I'd set her up to fail with Damian, and that I was still obsessed with her. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer and made sure my personal accounts, addresses, and business information were locked down. But the part that really shook me came a few days later when I ran into one of my former co-workers at a coffee shop. He was still with the company, one of the few people who had been sympathetic when everything went down. Dan said he'd heard Emily was back in town. Not just back, staying in the same building Damian had kicked her out of. Apparently, she'd convinced his assistant to let her retrieve some personal things and then just stayed. Claimed she had rights to the property until the divorce was officially processed, and Damian, too embarrassed and tied up with legal trouble, hadn't done anything about it yet. She was squatting in luxury. Dan told me one more thing. He said Emily had been spotted meeting with another potential Mark, a venture capitalist nearly twice her age who'd been at several business mixers in the city lately. The pattern was starting again. And suddenly the pieces clicked. This wasn't just about what she did to me or Damian. It was her blueprint. Marry up, squeeze fast, disappear. She'd fine-tuned it now. 1 year, 1 day, that was her formula. That night, I found myself staring at an old photo on my phone. It was taken 3 years ago. Me and Emily on a beach holding drinks, smiling like we were the definition of a perfect couple. It was fake, all of it. I couldn't believe how real it felt at the time, but maybe that was the worst part about people like her. They knew how to make it feel real. I deleted the photo. The next morning, my lawyer called. She told me Emily had made inquiries about reopening spousal support negotiations. Even though she had divorced me and married Damian, her lawyers were now hinting that I had somehow benefited from her rise in wealth and owed her a share of it. It was nonsense. Desperate, baseless, but annoying. I told my lawyer to shut it down completely. And later that day, I got another call. Emily again, this time from a different number again, but her voice was unmistakable. She sounded tired, angry, and almost panicked. She said her plans weren't working out as she expected, that the new guy was stalling, that Damian had frozen assets, and that she was being targeted unfairly. Then she said something I'll never forget. She told me she wanted to come home. As if home was still me. As if I'd been standing still waiting for her like some lost puppy. I told her there was no home left, that she burned it down herself, and that whatever plan she had going now, I hoped for her sake she found someone stupid enough to fall for it again, because I was done playing the fool. She didn't respond. Just a long pause, and then the line went dead. That was the last time I heard from her directly, but something told me Emily wasn't finished. Not yet. Update 3. A few weeks passed with nothing but silence, no surprise emails, no desperate calls. No new rumors are swirling around about Emily's latest target. It felt suspicious. Emily never stayed quiet, unless she plotted something or running from something. I hoped I was wrong. Turns out it was both. I was heading into a downtown cafe for a quick lunch when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned and saw Lisa, Damian's ex-wife. I was surprised. She was holding her phone out and she looked tired but amused. She said she just received this and that I might want to see this. I took it while asking her what she was doing around here. She said she was visiting a relative and pointed to an elderly woman sitting in the corner. I nodded. It was a clip, grainy, clearly filmed on someone's phone. Emily was standing in a hotel lobby arguing with a man I didn't recognize at first. He looked older, wealthier, visibly furious. The audio was fuzzy, but you could make out enough. He was shouting about being lied to, about his bank accounts, about how she had promised things that turned out to be fabricated. Then he stormed off, leaving her alone and visibly shaken. Lisa said the man was Edward, a well-known venture investor who had recently backed out of a massive project due to what he called personal complications. In other words, Emily had tried to run her game on him and it backfired big time. But that wasn't even the real twist. The reason Lisa knew all of this, Edward was her cousin. Apparently, Emily had met him at a mutual friend's event weeks ago, not realizing who he was related to. Lisa had warned him early on, but he wanted to see for himself. He learned the hard way. That's when I realized something important. Emily had finally run out of safe places to land. Her web of lies was catching up to her. Damian was fighting to salvage his business and image. Edward had distanced himself completely, and word had begun to spread in the social circles she used to glide through. People weren't welcoming her anymore. They were warning each other. And the real kicker? The very next day, I got a call from Damian himself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was strained, quieter than I remembered. He said he wanted to apologize for everything, for the affair, the betrayal, firing me, ignoring every red flag, because he thought he was better than me. He told me Emily had almost cleaned him out, which I knew was a lie. That she'd been planning it for months, and by the time he caught on, it was too late. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just understanding, maybe even a little pity. I didn't give him either. He obviously wanted something because I knew he still had a lot of money, and there was a shady prenup involved, but now He said it wasn't enforced because of Emily. It was confusing, and I couldn't care less about the details. He asked me to testify for him. I rolled my eyes. So this is what it was about. I refused. They both had done me dirty. Instead, I told him something I wish someone had told me back when I was still trying to make things work with Emily. If you keep mistaking a red flag for a green light, don't be surprised when you crash. He told me to consider testifying. I didn't answer. I was not going to get myself involved in such a mess. He stayed silent for a long moment and then quietly said he hoped I was doing better now. I told him I was, because I was. My career had taken off. I had built something from the ground up that didn't just make money, it made me proud. My relationships, though fewer, were genuine. And best of all, I was finally at peace with what happened. Emily had taken so much from me: time, trust, confidence, but I'd taken it all back piece by piece. And then, just when I thought the saga was finally over, I received one last surprise: a letter, handwritten, from Emily. The handwriting was rushed. Pages were wrinkled. It looked like it had been written in a hurry or maybe a panic. She said she was leaving the country. She needed to start over somewhere new, that people were turning on her and pushing her into a corner. She didn't apologize, not really, but she admitted she'd made some calculated decisions that didn't work out, that she had always wanted more, and somewhere along the way she lost track of who she really was. She ended it with a strange sentence. She said, "You were the only one who never treated me like a means to an end, and I guess I was too broken to see the value in that." I folded the letter, tossed it in the drawer, walked away. It wasn't closure, not really, but it didn't need to be. The real closure had happened long ago, the moment I realized that healing doesn't begin when they say sorry. It begins when you stop waiting for it. Emily was gone. Damian was doing his thing. And me? I booked a trip to Europe. Not to run away, but to finally go on the trip I had promised myself years ago. Back when Emily said we couldn't afford it, even though I now knew she was already planning to leave me. This time it wasn't about revenge or escape. It was about starting a new chapter for myself on my terms. Because for once, I wasn't thinking about the past. I was thinking about where I was going. And that made all the difference. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.